Two pillars of the Carter Lake community were honored today with a brand new playground and basketball court. The Boys and Girls Clubs of the Midlands dedicated a playground to longtime supporter of the nonprofit community, Ethelene Hoofstoll. Basketball court is dedicated to Tom Kunkel, the former COO of the organization, who served for 42 years. Together, they've contributed more than $100,000 to bring the projects to life.
When you talk about both of these individual supports to coming together, they all wanted to make sure, hey, what can these kids utilize right away? What would be beneficial? What would that look like?
The playground and basketball court light up the space, bright colors. There's even an obstacle course inspired design. The goal of all of this to give the neighborhood kids a space to stay active.